Welcome to the AAST Presidential Grand Rounds. I'm Ronnie Stewart. Thanks for all of our attendees for joining today. Uh, it's a great honor and privilege to present today, and I'm really grateful for uh, for everyone on this call's leadership and all you do for trauma and trauma surgery across the United States and across the globe. I don't have any conflicts. The opinions that I'll express are mine and don't necessarily reflect the views of any other organization. I'm going to talk about the importance of our leadership, mine and yours, and its impact. This is just my personal view, my perspective on leadership learned through participation in multiple different organizations. And I'm going to emphasize some inclusive leadership principles, which I believe are super helpful for complex problems and also have a real benefit of engaging team members and improving social connections on teams. I'll talk a little mini primer about building emotional intelligence and management. I'll talk some on mentorship and coaching, and then I'll emphasize and wrap up with patient-centered advocacy. So before I get started, and I think probably a number of people will know this story, but it was shortly before Christmas 2011. I was doing some online Christmas shopping at my house when basically I realized that I was losing consciousness. I was in the front of a computer just like right now, and it became clear to me that it was a losing proposition, that I was losing consciousness, and my world really didn't gray out. It golded out. My visual fields basically became gold, and then the next thing, whenever I regained consciousness, I had a dense right hemiparesis and expressive aphasia, and I realized I'd had a stroke. Uh, I was extremely fortunate. I was actually supposed to be in the far rural parts of our region that morning, but I wasn't. And my daughter happened to be there. And uh, thanks to our system of care, our trauma and emergency healthcare system, I was treated super promptly, got TPA, and I think I had a pretty reasonable recovery. And I tell this story to you, even for those of you who know the story, not for anyone to feel bad or because it was one of the best things that's happened to me. Maybe not the best, but it was one of the best things, and it was particularly important for me to learn some lessons. And I want you all to know that as a patient, somebody who really needed help at the time, I, I want you to know that uh, that I've yet to be able to express the gratitude that I still feel to this day for the people who cared for me. And I want you to know that your patients too, even when they don't express it, have that same feeling of gratitude. Uh, As I said, I've never been able to adequately express it to the team members who cared for me, but I want you to know that our patients, your patients, are grateful for your service and your hard work. I also learned joy. Uh, I can't tell you the amount of joy I felt simply to be able to talk to my family and my friends, simply just to be able to talk to them. And it really drove home to me the importance of people and relationships in my life. And the last lesson I learned is time. I think I perhaps treated the world as if I had unlimited time, and it became very clear to me that I do not have unlimited time. None of us do. So this is a part of my care team, and I'm super grateful for all the work that they put in to help me through that event. And our patients are super, super grateful. So that leads into uh, our most important resource, what is most important with respect to our care. Well, the scarcest, most valuable resource is not money. No matter how much people talk about it, it's not money. It's not beautiful buildings, hospitals, or clinics. It's not technology. It's not hardware. It's not software. The most valuable and critical resource for us is our people. Our people are our most important resource. And if we treat our people in that way, then we will advocate, defend, and I can have more gratitude. Our people are our most important resource. Our people, these are some AAST team members and some from my home institution and our wonderful AAST staff. Thank you for putting on this webinar today. But this is the most important thing we have. And so for our people, myself included, we all benefit from coaching, from mentoring, from working uh, with them to help themselves to work with them to help themselves to become the best version of themselves that they can be or that we can be. This fosters strong, functional teams, but our people are the most important thing we have. My first rule of leadership is really, really simple. And I do think it is the first rule of leadership, and it's something that's easy to overlook. The first rule of leadership is for us, for me and you, to understand the impact we have on the people around us. To truly understand the impact that we have on the people around us. I'm sure some of you are similar, but you can probably think back to when you entered into medical school and clinical care and were a junior resident. I can still recount exact conversations that I had with the people who were leading our teams. I will never forget some of those conversations. So the first thing about leadership is to understand that we have major impact on the people around us. I think we as a profession, as a group of people, I think we know that and are very clear that we perform procedures that have an immediate and permanent impact on our patients, and we are emotionally invested in the care. That's our strength, and I'll talk how it can potentially sometimes be our weakness, but I view it as a strength that I am emotionally invested in the care that we provide to our patients. Joan Cassell, an author in her book Life and Death in the ICU, calls it a covenant of care. That surgeons have a covenant of care that this is to the patient, that this is going to be difficult, it's hard, but we are committed to helping get you through this in spite of the fact that it's difficult, and it's a covenant that we make with the patient. And just as with an operation, I want to emphasize that the way we lead, the way we work with others, leaves a permanent mark on them. That mark can be positive or negative. And I will just say that if I'm not thinking, if I'm not being mindfully conscious about that the impact that I may have on the people around me, it is far more likely that me as the chair of surgery or as the president of the AAST, it's much more likely for me to do unconscious harm than unconscious good if I'm not thinking about it. So I just try to be mindful about conscious decisions about being good. This is a wonderful metaphor here from Peggy Tabor Millen. You can read what she says, but she basically made the observation while she was sitting watching raindrops that when she watched one drop touch another and then came together and then separated, and she realized at that time that neither of those drops would ever be the same. It's true with leadership. So our leadership, your leadership, has a powerful and permanent impact on our teammates. It's helpful for us to understand that, to be mindful about maximizing the benefit and minimizing harm. And I think a good way for us as surgeons to think about it is to wield that power with the same judgment that we would with an operation. I'm going to talk about an approach to leadership that comes from the trauma community. It comes from working with a group of surgeons, of nurses, of paramedics, of public health professionals over the past 40 years. I do know that the world is complex, it's multifaceted, and I don't know if you've noticed, but it's a little polarized. There's a lot of political polarization. I'll emphasize highlight some works of others. Donnella Meadows, or Dana Meadows, is one of those people. She's a systems researcher, not a surgeon. Um, was on the systems team at MIT. Uh, and she wrote this, I think, in the early 70s. And it may feel worse today, but I think it's just as true today. Just as true today. I do think, though, it is a legitimate question of where we are as uh, across the globe and in the United States is can we functionally address complex problems? Can we do that? And the answer, of course, is yes, we can. But it's pretty clear that we sometimes struggle to deal with really big, complex, messy problems. Can we do it? Yes, we can. And I'm going to highlight what I think are ways that have been proven to address complex problems. To do that, it requires us to use both halves of our brain. We have to use both halves. Um, we can't use one half for a period of time and another half for another. I've come to think of some of the political divide as being relatively hardwired. And I can tell you, as someone who's had loss of function of one part of the brain, it's better to use both halves. And as I've said before, I know some of you have heard me say this, but it is very true. Some of you are a natural bridge builder and are actually a social corpus callosum. And so we can build bridges across these divides. Uh, and it's critically important for our patients, for our children, and for our country to do those things. One way to do that is to do service leadership. And I was having dinner with Dr. Brazel, as you can see here. And, she basically, we're just talking, and she said, I think our first rule of thumb in leadership should be to look for the service opportunity first. Not what's the leadership opportunity for me, but what's the service opportunity. One of the books, one of the best books on servant leadership is written by Robert Greenleaf. And this text is from the late 60s, early 70s. And he's asking the question of why does it seem that some ages struggle and there seems to be such a shortage of leadership? And he gives his view that what marks those periods as barren and some as rich is the level of seeking and the responsiveness of the hearers. Who are we listening to? What are we listening to? And how are we listening to it? Dana Meadows, these are little snippets from her book on thinking in systems. Sage advice today. For me, for us, stay humble, stay a learner, go for the good of the whole, be multidisciplinary, defy the disciplines. Don't divide up into little pieces. Expand the boundary of caring, and for the system, don't erode the goal of goodness. I'm going to describe my view of our system of care, and goodness is at the heart of that. So don't erode the goal of goodness. And probably an incredibly wise piece of advice, I'll just let you read this quote. I think it's helpful for us to know that everything that I know, everything that I think I know is a model. It's my model. But if I get my model out there where you can challenge it, where you can see it, where you can ask questions about it and question my assumptions, we can improve the system and I can improve myself and improve my leadership. She breaks the system. She breaks it into three simple parts: the elements, the interactions of the elements, the function of the purpose. So for the elements, for our system, for trauma, that would be the trauma centers, the trauma surgeons, the emergency physicians, the EMS system, the communication system, and how those elements interact, and what's the function or the purpose. And she uses an iceberg model, and she makes the point that uh, that in a system there's increasing points of leverage, and that we tend to focus on the events, what happened today, what's the news of today. As my grandson Miles, who's 2 years old, says, "What's happening here?" We focus on the events of what is happening. But as you go down to increasing leverage points, the next level would be patterns of behavior. What are the trends over time? Then how do these parts relate? How do they interact? What's the system structure? But the most important leverage point and the most important part of a system is the mental model. And as she describes, what are its values, assumptions, and beliefs? That those beliefs and values are the most important, have the greatest impact on a system. This is a late colleague and friend, Deb Mueller. Uh, she died at an untimely age. But this was Dr. Mueller's value. Her main thing. Today, I'm going to do good wherever it is. Today, I'm going to do good wherever it is. And that was the main driver of what she did. Then you can see she describes the importance of mentorship and engaging things that we're passionate about, and we can affect change through subtle actions to encourage the future to be better. But so her model determined all that she did. What's her driving principle of her model? So I know many people know that I have 7 P's to be. Uh, I learned these from trauma surgeons, from the people on these teams. Be participatory, be professional, be a problem solver, be a performance improvement leader. And the last three are simply implementation tools. Be passionate about what we do, but be patient and be perseverant. But I'm going to talk about two of these. The first is professional. And what I mean by that is, what is our profession? What do we profess? And we profess that the patient's interests come first. The trauma community has been a strong and steadfast voice for a patient-centered system. This is a quote from Dr. Trunke from 1989, that our trauma system of care is designated for the benefit of the patient, not for the hospital and not for me. It's for the benefit of the patient. I think this is beautifully stated in Richard Moulton's presidential address, where he emphasizes that we dedicate ourselves to the services of humanity, and we place the needs of the patient above ourselves, and we will base our knowledge and actions on objective scientific truth as best we can determine it. And so that professional model is built on a foundation of trust. The trust is the foundation. This is from Lencioni's 5 Dysfunctions of Team. It's my modification of it, turning the dysfunctions into positive statements. And our entire profession is, from simple to complex, the professional model is built on trust. If you ask me to see a patient, you may trust but verify, but you trust that I will see that patient, and you trust that I am going to do my best to care for that patient. All the things that we do in a profession is built on the trust, and the public trusts us. In some ways, it's a sacred trust. It's a trust. They trust us to do the right thing. And so a foundational team member skill or team member skills, two skills, is the ability to trust and be trustworthy. Two things. If I'm very trustworthy and I'm on your team, but I can't trust, you likely will think that I maybe have opportunities for improvement as a team member. I have to be able to trust and be trustworthy. Trust and be trustworthy. And for the young people on this webinar, I would give you two things if I could. I tell the third year medical students every 6 to 8 weeks, I tell them that if I could give them two things, I would give them confidence and I would give them the ability to be their own best constructive self-coach. Confidence and the ability to be our own best constructive self-coach. I tell them that I can't give those to you. You have to take them, and I would like for you to believe me. Surgeons believe this. This is a survey that Dr. Katie Wiggins and I did now 15 years ago or more. And when we surveyed surgeons we asked them to give 3 words on what they thought were behaviors that should be encouraged and discouraged. Competence, confidence, and composure were their top 3 to be encouraged. Anger, panic, and indecision were to be discouraged. So surgeons believe and know that confidence is important. One of the surgeons said this on the survey. You can see here that 100% of the surgeons in the survey felt that confidence is either very beneficial or beneficial. And as you can see that one person said, it's a blueprint. That confidence serves the surgeon as the blueprint does the carpenter. Confidence, not arrogance. Confidence, my definition of confidence is the belief that we can and we will achieve the goal or task in front of us. The true belief that I can do it and we will be able to achieve that goal in front of us. That's confidence. Arrogance is the belief that we are better than others. Confidence and arrogance are not the same, and one can be confident and humble at the same time. Be confident. Be confident. The second P that I'm going to talk about is the ability to be our own best constructive self-coach. Be a performance improvement leader. Becoming our own best constructive self-coach. So whenever I look at people who are naturally good at performance improvement, and there are some of us, wasn't me, by the way, but there are some who are just naturally good at it. That's one of the great things about surgical training and working with surgeons is some people are just incredibly skilled. Now, I know that's actually from hard work, but sometimes it seems they're just so great at it. So those who are really great at PI, they basically do their best and they look back and see how they can do it incrementally better, just a little bit better. They actively look for opportunities for improvement, how to get a little bit better. And when they're really into it, they basically make a commitment that no one will suffer in vain. That's our teammates, our team members. We will learn and grow from everything. And that when a complication occurs, be responsible and accountable, but be constructive, i.e. non-destructive. Don't make a bad situation worse for ourselves or others. That requires emotional management. And whenever I frame those people who've been inspiration to me, they follow a process of be responsible and accountable, and then forgive, learn, and improve. Forgive, learn, improve. That's what they do. It's helpful. We surgeons, like all human beings, we have oftentimes a pretty strenuous and tough internal self-critic. our inner voice to ourselves is sometimes harsh. But through a work of a team actually right down the road from where I am in Austin, they basically say the key to educating my self-critic is to talk to myself in an identical tone and content to the way that I would speak to my best friend or my most valued and trusted colleague. That would be accurate, but kind, respectful, and compassionate. And to be mindful to not exaggerate the problem or not to minimize the problem, but to be compassionate and constructive. So we can be our own best constructive self-coach by being mindful to be compassionate and constructive in our voice to ourselves. And I want you to know, I want the young people especially to know on this call, that if you can do these things and follow the process that you know, the process of surgical care and surgical training, you can and you will transform the world. It has been proven you can and you will. So, how to build trust in our teams and organizations, if it really is the foundation of this pyramid, how to build trust in teams and organizations. So, here I'm going to emphasize inclusive leadership principles, a way of thinking about addressing difficult problems while also building trust, achieving psychological safety, and social connectedness. And I didn't put it on here, but by the way, and also having a great deal of fun. These four principles, if we were set to build a trauma system anywhere on the globe, if there was, a handful of us who went to build that system, I believe if we follow these four principles, we will invariably have long-term success. The first principle is be maximally inclusive with all stakeholders. Be inclusive with all stakeholders. And being inclusive means not just being heard, it means involving those stakeholders in the decision, involving them in the decision. And that is tremendously powerful once people on our teams know that they have, that as a stakeholder, they actually influence and can change a decision. It really improves engagement. Second principle is foster the discussion, the dialogue, foster a dialogue on what's the right thing to do for the patient and commit that we will make decisions by consensus. Foster the discussion, keep the discussion right front and center. What's the right thing to do for the patient or the population being served? And we're going to make decisions by consensus. That means that we can live with it. We may not totally agree, but we can live with it enough that we can continue to work together and creatively develop alternative solutions, decisions by consensus. And if cooperation and communication are important, make those values. Make cooperation and communication values. We hear a lot about winning. I'll talk about it, about the value of competition in winning. But cooperation and communication saves lives. Make those values. And the last thing is have a bias for action. To do what? A bias for what sorts of action? To do actions that improve the care or improve the situation of the patient. In STRAC, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, we've not had a non-unanimous vote in more than 28 years. This does take talk, it takes tolerance, and it takes time, but the time part, we think of as taking time, but I believe those four principles actually are much more efficient and save time versus multiple conflicts over time. So there's some decision-making styles: autocratic, democratic, collective, consensus. So on this call, I would ask, is the smartest person in this meeting smarter than the collective intelligence in this meeting? Well, the answer is obvious. It's never. It's never. If we're able to harness the creative vision and energy of all in the room, it's never. It's always better if we can harness the energy and intelligence of the entire group, and it's self-correcting. I cannot tell you, well, I'll just make an estimate. In my leadership of, of trauma systems with complex problems, I'm wrong at least 25% of the time. It's self-correcting and better. At our sons, these are my children here, that at our son Jackson, his graduation, the speaker said these three things are critical elements for maximal success, which I agree with: hard work, talent, and a network of support. And consensus builds a network of support. Working in that way builds a network of support. But it's not just about a network of support. It really is a higher level of decision making. It's win-win thinking. We don't all have to agree, but we have to agree enough that we can live with it. Win-win. And in that process, we don't always get what we want, but we get what we need, and we come up with creative alternatives. And win-win or no deal is the highest level of that. So some people feel and there are weaknesses of everything. There's strengths and weaknesses of everything we do, but there's a risk of paralysis. It's too slow, groupthink, a sign of weakness, or chaos. I think these are perhaps risk. I think paralysis is perhaps the greatest risk, losing sight of what we're centered on and not doing it. That's why the fourth principles have a bias for action. This is a book written by Martin Dempsey and Ori Brofman. Martin Dempsey was an Army general, chief of staff, and Ori Brofman is a vegan business professor from California. And this is well pre-pandemic, this book, but I think they're spot on here. So where I am right now, I'm actually in a STRAC office. That this consensus-based approach has led to so many innovative programs in our region that are beneficial for our community. These are just some of them. And these are just some of them. And some of them are very controversial, like our mental health crisis intervention. We currently have a mental health crisis intervention system in our region that gets the patient in mental health crisis to the right place in the right time for the right care. And that was very controversial, but the STRAC budget is now about $45 million a year. And almost half of that budget is in the mental health crisis intervention system. So moving forward, what are some threats to inclusive leadership? I think perhaps pitfalls of us as of people, perhaps successful people. Okay, here's some of them. Winning all the time. Winning, the need to win at all costs, in all situations, when it matters, when it doesn't, and when it's completely beside the point. My weakness, adding too much value, the desire to add our 2 cents to every discussion. These become burdensome over time in this process if we don't manage them. So, there's Michael Jordan here, and he was once told in an interview of the great documentary series from this past year, that there's no I in team. His response to that was, well, there is an I in winning. And it's true, but people have different ideas. If we look at it as win-lose, some people look at it as lose-win, or just simply to win. Some people, when they're really down, look at it as lose-lose. You're going to lose, I'm going to lose. But if we use win-win or no deal as our guide for consensus decision making, it really is functionally better. So what about us? My team, me, myself, us. So what are some common causes where we may behave not in the best way that we would like? Well, honestly, there's difficult situations we're in. They're super difficult. There's difficult patients, difficult colleagues, and difficult times. This definitely has an influence on us. And we have a strong emotional investment in the care of the patient. It's our strength, but it can also be a weakness. It can be a weakness if we don't manage it. Arrogance, the belief that I'm better than others, is a cause. Shame and embarrassment. We surgeons don't deal well with embarrassment or shame, and it sometimes leads to us reacting in ways that we would not want. Fatigue, burnout, compassion fatigue, PTSD, truth telling, an excessive need to be me, to be colorful in the center of attention. But I think a common reason is we fail to see the consequence or the cost. We don't, whenever I act in that way, I've lost sight of the consequences or the cost. But the good news is temperament is not destiny. Uh, and a really tiny little primer of leadership, emotional management. First, our emotions are strong. They're also very important for decision making, but they can hijack us. But we have a choice. We have a choice to manage our emotions. If we choose to have that choice, we have a choice. And so emotional intelligence facilitates emotional management. And some of you on this call have a gift. It's not me, but some of you have a gift that uh, you were just from a very early age and still to this day are great at organizing groups, negotiating solutions, personal connections, and analyzing a social situation. It's a gift. But so, as I said, gifts can be acquired by hard work, and if we're just mindful, we can achieve that gift ourselves. I love this interview with Mike and Wayne here, where Wayne Meredith's advice for preventing toxic thoughts was to look for 6 good things to say for people in our teams, a 6-to-1 ratio. And then he said something like, if you're 1 to 6, get 1-to-1, but 6-to-1 is a great ratio. Uh, Presume virtuous intent. It would change our world. Presuming virtuous intent. If the Starbucks barista mixes up my order, it's not because they meant to do so. Presume virtuous intent. And the last thing is keep in mind, what is our North Star? Why are we doing this? What we already talked about for the patient. This is a great YouTube video. I put a QR code up there. I'm not gonna go over it on this, but it's a great Brene Brown animated video. It's worth 3 minutes of watching it. So, in the great scene of Ted Lasso, for some of you who know Ted Lasso, in the Darts with Rupert scene, be curious, not judgmental. He attributed that quote to Walt Whitman, which apparently he didn't make that quote, but it's still a great quote. Be curious, not judgmental. In the group from the 15 commitments of conscious leadership, that's their approach. This simple mental model that when we're in a discussion and it's a difficult discussion and it's challenging, just imagine a line in front of me, and I can choose to be above the line. If I'm above the line, I'm open, I'm curious, I'm relaxed, and I'm committed to learning. And that's a choice. I can go above the line. They emphasize that the baseline for human beings is to be below the line, and that's if I'm closed, defensive, committed to being right, and I'll just say committed to winning. I can be above the line or below the line, but they emphasize that should be a conscious choice. It's from a book on key coaching models from the Harvard Business School. It's really simple. Be aware of my emotions, sense the emotion. If I sense it, name it, name the emotion. I'm happy, I'm angry, whatever the emotion, name it. Accept that that's how it is. Don't try to suppress it, it will make it worse. Accept it, choose to do nothing, and then decide. Be aware, name it, accept. Don't do anything right now, then decide what to do. A conscious choice. Simplified, be mindful of the impact we have on others. Practice Dr. Meredith's rules. And in the moment, name the emotion, do nothing, decide what to do. But for heaven's sake, do not send an emotional email or text. That's not the time. And if you need to ventilate, you can call a trusted colleague. You can call me. If you need to ventilate to a trusted person in your life. the importance of social connection. I love this sentiment from Dr. Bolger. Identify our passion, harness that passion to define our purpose, find a home in our community, engage professional societies, consciously help build and enhance our community, and support each other and avoid burnout. Make lasting friendships that enrich your lives. It's beautiful. So, a simple social strategy to mitigate burnout is develop a network of supportive friends and colleagues, cultivate and celebrate positive patient experiences, and develop healthy supportive interests outside of medicine, family, exercise, art, pets, and community. Moving on to advocacy. The advocate is committed, willing to change the status quo, willing to endure challenge, hardship, risk, and sacrifice, willing to endure challenge, hardship, risk, and sacrifice. A desire to work with others across a divide to build coalitions big enough to affect change, the ability to tell a story and have a bias for action. This is from Dr. Britt's Scudder oration. So true. The moral arc does not bend on its own. It does not bend by itself. It requires commitment, effort, and sacrifice. This is from Alex Walt, circa 1978. How and for what should we advocate? We should advocate for the optimal care of the sick or injured patient. That is our lodestar. That concept is our guide. We could and should be zealous without being zealots. Stand strongly for what we think to be right without being self-righteous. Face moral problems without being moralistic. And promote sanity without sanctimony. So advocacy for our patients, that should be our guide. There's many things to advocate for. The National Trauma and Emergency Preparedness System, the Coalition for National Trauma Research to match the burden of the health problem, firearm injury prevention and violence prevention, ACS quality programs. Give to the ACS PAC. I know this is not an ACS call, and I'm not on the PAC board, and it may cause me pain, but give to the ACS PAC because it influences, and the PAC gives to both sides. Be an advocate. Every patient needs an advocate. This is a mom and patient of mine that we've kind of followed each other for the past quarter of a century. And this is direct quotes from her talking to me that he was so severely injured, and that she said, I had to fight from day one. And she said, I can't tell you the number of times that I've heard people say, he can't, he won't, he'll never. And then she says, very, very respectfully, mostly all wrong. But she says, you can count on one hand the number of times that I went against a doctor. But when I did, she said, you be the doctor, I'll be the mother. And she talked about the difficulty of being an advocate, fatigue, but she is a perseverant, kind, effective advocate. These are traits to be admired and to be emulated. So, but advocacy is not just good for, it's not just good for the patient. It's good for us. Just like children need positive childhood experiences, we healthcare professionals need positive patient experiences. It brings joy to us. It's not just good for the patient. It's good. It builds positive patient and family relationships. So celebrate small and large victories. Celebrate great patient outcomes. Rejoice in those outcomes. So in summary, my recommendation for us, for me, is to be mindful about conscious leadership. And the question for me is what is the service opportunity? Not what's the leadership opportunity. The first question is, What's the service opportunity? Then in leadership, which everyone is a leader, from the third-year medical student to the, PGY 40 like me, is to implement an inclusive, consensus-based, patient-centered leadership because it builds trust, engagement, and functional teams. Be confident. Be confident. And be participatory, be professional, be a problem solver. Be your own best constructive self-coach. Forgive, learn, improve, but be passionate about what you're doing. It really makes a difference. But be patient and be perseverant. Work on building our emotional intelligence while maintaining our emotional investment. Work together to address burnout, compassion fatigue, and PTSD through our social connections, and advocate for our patients. Stand strong for what we think is right without being self-righteous. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to take questions. Questions?
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. That was wonderful. I don't see any questions coming through.
And Rizzo raised her hand.
Oh, one moment. Okay, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Ronnie, that was fabulous. And my question is about the self-critique. I ask my residents to do it after every case. What grade are you going to give yourself on this case? Why are you giving yourself a B? But for us to do it for ourselves, as you brought up, is very difficult. So do you have some tips on how we can evaluate our performance at the senior leadership meeting, at the board meeting, at whatever venture we're undertaking? Because to me, that is a hard concept. But thanks again.
Thank you, Dr. Rizzo. Well, my advice is the principle of what I said is to when we are critiquing ourselves to critique ourselves as if we're giving advice to our best and most trusted friend, our most trusted relationship, and that would be honest, but it would be framed in a way that is compassionate and that leads to constructive change. You and I are good friends, and I can say with some real certainty that if you came to me with the problem, I wouldn't dismiss it as that's not a problem, but I also would not yell at you. I would not say things that people say to themselves. I'm stupid. I can't do this. These are things that a very harsh internal self-critic. I don't belong here. These are things that the harsh critic tells the person, i.e. themselves. So we should be mindfully compassionate, but we should be mindful about not minimizing the problem. And you talk about in the boardroom and when you're in a leadership role, I think we should be mindful that I'll say I should be mindful that I may not get direct negative critique because people may not be comfortable giving me that feedback, particularly if I'm their boss. So I think we have to pay attention to those cues, and listen. And if we use that framework of being maximally inclusive, like everybody knows that in those four principles, to be inclusive, that people know they can give their input, and then they will want to do that. Focus that discussion on what's the right thing for the patient. But if people feel included and they really know, and the culture is that you can disagree without fear that you're going to be in trouble. As a matter of fact, you can disagree and be complimented that thank you for questioning that. Because as I said, I mean, I think the pandemic showed the limits of expertise as well with the complex problem. And I think we should look for and solicit alternative creative approaches, and even that, we disagree and I think you're wrong, and be willing to take that feedback and think about it and act if it is accurate. Hey, Dr. Butler raised her hand.
Dr. Stewart, thank you for just an outstanding presentation. I wondered as I was listening to you, I've lived through many, many milestones of my training and have gotten to a place where I think emotional intelligence for myself is certainly at the forefront of my ongoing development. But I wonder how we're able to implement that, assess that in our residents. We don't teach them how to be emotionally intelligent. I learned how to be better at that over time, having mentors and people who are important to me, who are role models, but we don't assess that in our residents necessarily. So my question, do you think that should be, do we need to change some of the things that we focus on when we're assessing residents as they progress through their milestones of training from PGY1 to PGY5 year?
I don't know. I mean, we measure a whole bunch of things in residence, and I wouldn't be opposed to it. I think though we should encourage emotional management. Like, I mean, it's the simple model. I mean, I'm a very simple person. Okay. I mean, challenged in some ways, but I think if we're aware, okay, well, what are the basic principles of emotional management? That's one of the books that I cited, what got you here won't get you there. That's a great resource. I mean, I think if I would have read that whenever I was a resident, it would have been really helpful to me. It would have been helpful. But so I think giving them resources and then using that kind of simple approach of, okay, when emotions are normal, you're going to get emotional. And I still do. I would try to suppress the emotion, and uh, I'll just give an example. I'm giving a talk here, but whenever it took me, I mean, at least six, and maybe it's been a lifetime and still hasn't been there, but it took me 6 years before I felt even semi-comfortable with giving an oral presentation in front of my peers, because I would be so nervous and anxious that I was being judged, that I had an accent, that I'm not from here, and that I would be so anxious. And the harder I tried to suppress that nervousness, the worse it was. So to teach the basic principle that for whether it's nervousness there, fear, whether it is anger, whatever the emotion is, recognize the emotion, don't try to suppress it, recognize it, name it. I'm angry. Okay, I'm angry. Pause, feel it. If I don't take any action, let's say I'm giving in the middle of this presentation, if I became anxious, I know now that if I just let it be and don't try to suppress it, it will go away. It will go away in just a minute or two. And that is true with other emotions like anger. It will get better in a minute or two unless I try to suppress it. And then it bundles up and puts it under pressure. But if we can teach residents to recognize the emotion, feel it, recognize it, take no action, pause, and then decide how you're going to react on that emotion. And sometimes the right approach, what varies by every situation, but sometimes the right approach would be to do nothing. Sometimes I've found that whenever I use that approach, I realize the most constructive situation, the most constructive action from my standpoint might be to do the opposite of how I feel at the time. But I think that's a very teachable skill. I, I'm not, I wasn't in that group of when I said the people have a gift at emotional management. it can be taught, and I think we can teach it in a way that can be also a little fun. Thanks, Dr. Butler. Other questions?
Valerie Sams, I believe, had her.
Dr. Sams?
Yeah. Hey, Dr. Stewart, how are you? Great talk. I missed the first few minutes. Just real quick, I just wanted to see what your advice was. You know, what a couple of things that may be where I am in my professional development and leadership that I'm struggling with. One is, you know, as we are truth tellers and problem solvers and passionate people trying to not want to win at everything, but picking the right things. So advice you have on how we can just take a deep breath, take a step back, and figure out what battles we want to fight. And then the second piece to that is, as we are become leaders within our individual organizations, but we're also part of these more national strategic level organizations, being able to separate the two, still advocate for your local organization with the strategic vision in mind. But you know, staying true to your team, if you will.
Yeah. No,
Thanks for your talk.
Thank you. And thanks for all you're doing, Dr. Sams. Really, really appreciate your leadership. Well, I think you mentioned truth telling. I think the first thing in truth telling is that if I feel like it's important for me to tell the truth, I need to ask myself, is this the truth, or is this simply a very strongly held opinion that I have? Am I being truthful, or am I simply feel the need to express my very strong opinion that I feel about to be true? And so I try, whenever I feel myself saying, well, to be honest, I try to do a little internal check. Am I really am I trying to be truthful, or am I trying to give my closely held, really strong opinion that somebody else may differ with, and it may not be the truth at all? So I think being considerate of that, i.e., simple, it goes along with that emotional management approach that I just commented on. I think in that instance, that is to think about it and then decide how is the best way to advocate. And if the best way to advocate is to be passionate and strong about it, then be passionate and strong about it. Try to make it a choice, though, a choice that you're going to choose to do this. And once you write, and then if you know that you have the choice to be really passionate about it, or you have the choice to actually be maybe, really calm and relaxed, and to basically change the whole tone of the discussion. I think that should be, feel it, and that should be a choice. In general, it's best to be above that line that I talked about. In general, I think it's best to be curious, not judgmental, because it continues a conversation. And be curious and interested in learning is a good thing to do, particularly when emotions are high. Any other questions?
Dr. Fisher?
Hey, Dr. Stewart, thank you for that talk. Great talk.
Thanks, Dr.
Quick question for you. And I completely agree with you that teams can really function really, really well, especially when they always put the patient first, right? When everybody's but you're going to be in teams where some people may have patient first, some people may have profits first, people have other things first. How do you get, in your opinion, how do you get consensus on, before the decision is even made, how do you get this consensus on what the goal is of who's first? Because a lot of times I think we're put in these situations where, information security thinks that they are by far the absolute most important thing, to the hospital, regardless of, they don't care about patient care, right? And so, like, how do you get that and get them to realize the impact that they're having on the patients? Because that really should be what the first thing is.
Yeah. Well, I think you have to engage in a discussion about that. I think it would be great in those settings if and you have to basically get, into a position to, that the culture and values are the patient first. It's one of the reasons why, I mean, I'm biased, but I really do love working with surgeons, and I love working with groups like the American Association for Surgery of Trauma and the American College of Surgeons, because it's explicit that the patient comes first. And so I think we should not be shy about advocating for the patient first. Sometimes though, that if someone doesn't have that natural view, you have to engage in a discussion. You have to talk about it, but you can work the discussion around to, okay, is this really, you can just simply ask questions. Is this what we're talking about? Is this in the best interest of our patients? Because maybe I don't actually understand or see that it is, but maybe I don't understand. You can engage people in a discussion who may not think about being patient-centered. But I think you can influence the, those those discussions by the basic the basic principles that I talked about.